We celebrate God's incredible gift of grace. That amazing grace overcomes the worst of our humanity and brings us into this relationship with God. And the new life that we heard described in our epistle lesson goes beyond just what sounded like a list of rules. That reading from Ephesians is all about transformation. Following rules both limits our capacity for growth and God's ability to exceed our wildest expectations. If we just know the rules and do what the rules say, life can be pretty simple, in fact. But the rules we encounter in the Bible are different. They're always different. When we read a rule in Scripture, the intent is rarely as simple as just following the letter of the law. The metanarrative is about who God is and how we can relate to our Maker and to one another. Since the story goes beyond what we can see, everything, including the rules, is about our transformation. It's personal. We change, and then these rules, these do's and don'ts, they help us understand what that inner change looks like in the world. A man named Admiral McRaven told a story that's similar to this kind of change. His story was about reimagining a situation and making it better, in fact, than anyone could have pictured. He told this story during a commencement address at the University of Texas at Austin in 2014. And the story is about an experience he had had when he was young and he was training to become a Navy SEAL. During the 9th week of SEAL training, they do something they lovingly call Hell Week. I've never been through SEAL training, so I can only imagine it must be lovely to earn that name. But on Wednesday of Hell Week, he described this scene on the mud flats between San Diego and Tijuana, where it's cold and wet, and they had been out on these flats for 15 hours. And the sun was starting to set when someone in his training group broke some rule, and I do have enough familiarity with the military that sometimes these rules are just set up so that they can then impose some sort of punishment. And as the sun went down, the instructors ordered the men to get into the mud, and each one sank down so that nothing but his head was showing. As they shivered, the instructors said, "Y'all can get out if just 5 of you will quit. If 5 of you will quit, you can all get out of the mud." And now, on a quote McRaven, he said, "Looking around the mud flat, it was apparent that some of the students were about to give up. It was still over 8 hours until the sun came up, 8 more hours of bone-chilling cold. The chattering teeth and shivering moans of the trainees were so loud it was hard to hear anything. And then, in the darkness, one voice began to echo, one voice raised in song. The song was terribly out of tune, but sung with great enthusiasm. One voice became 2, 2 became 3, and before long, everyone in the class was singing. We knew that if one man could rise above the misery, then others could as well. The instructors threatened us with more time in the mud if we kept up the singing, but the singing persisted. And somehow, the mud seemed a little warmer, and the wind a little tamer, and dawn not quite so far away." McRaven described the lesson as one of hope. I would call that singing transformative. The song, whatever it was, allowed these trainees to see the world a little differently. They were no longer just stuck, freezing in the mud. They were part of something. Our epistle lesson today invites us to be part of something, part of a family. We are part of one another in faith. Now, when Allison read this section from Ephesians, it sounds like there are a lot of instructions. But Ephesians is a part of a tradition that formed people into disciples. We think of it as a letter, but it was more likely the product of one or more of Paul's disciples. It was so formative that the early church was studying it and copying it as our ancestors of faith figured out what it means to follow Christ. And on the screens, you'll see a fragment of Ephesians. This was a fragment that some people found in Cairo in 1931. The origin of the ancient papyrus is likely somewhere in Egypt, but the exact location isn't known. But as you look at this on the screen, you can see this original scribe had very good, legible handwriting, especially legible if you can read Koine Greek. The fragment is badly frayed, as you see, but it shows how important these instructions from our epistle lesson were to the early church. Our reading begins by reminding readers to speak the truth to one another because we're part of one another. Like the singing sailors in the mud, we belong to each other. This verse includes the verse from Zechariah that I shared at the beginning of the service that says, "Speak the truth to one another." See, singing in the mud didn't change the cold reality these sailors faced. It changed how they processed it and how they approached it. It's the same thing that happens when Jesus transforms our lives. We still have problems. In fact, the problems are no different. We still struggle. But with a new life in Christ, we process what we face in a new way. After that opening about belonging to one another and telling one another the truth, the passage launches into this rapid-fire list of 7 rules. Be angry, but don't sin. Thieves, stop stealing. Don't say anything that's evil. Put away bitterness. Be kind to one another. Imitate God and live in love. Keep this passage, maybe not open in front of you right now, but keep it this week. Keep it in front of you. When John Wesley was preaching a sermon about this passage, he highlighted the significance of knowing that it's the Holy Spirit that's leading us into holiness and truth. Each of these rules embodies living out a Spirit-led life. Still, the rules don't stand on their own. Each one has a deeper implication. It's not enough to simply follow the rule. The rule provides some guardrails so that we can better understand what transformation looks like in our daily lives. Let's look at be angry. I don't think we can go through all of them because each one has deep and profound implications. But just look at be angry for a moment. That's not an injunction or a command. Go be angry. The author of Ephesians recognizes that people are going to get angry. It's going to happen because even though we accept and embrace God's amazing grace, here's some news, we're still human. We don't get to stop being human just because we're transformed into the likeness of Christ. The rule is about what to do when we get angry. And it might have been clearer if it had said, I get it. I understand. You're still going to get angry, but when that happens, don't sin. Don't go to bed angry. Don't live into your anger. This reminds me of the dilemma for Jedis in Star Wars. In Star Wars, that very famous movie franchise, there's this duality between the light and the dark sides of the Force. And this repeated theme throughout the different Star Wars movies is don't give in to the dark side. Star Wars can help illustrate a point from Ephesians, then I am happy to invoke the gospel of George Lucas. When you're angry, don't turn into a Sith Lord. Those who like Star Wars will get that. In Ephesians, the order to keep looking to the light, even in anger, connects with the instruction just a few verses later. Don't say anything evil. It's verse 29. We don't refrain from evil speech for the sake of not saying anything mean. That's fine and that's great, and that works for something like all I need to know I learned in kindergarten. That's clear. But for those of us who want a little bit more, we can read the rest of verse 29. Let no evil talk come from your mouths, but only what is useful for building up, as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. See, it's not just don't say anything bad. It's build up. Extend God's grace. Show God's love in what you say. People have always struggled with whether or not to do the right thing. This passage pushes us to be better, not by following the rules, but by being transformed, by embodying Christ in our daily lives. Let's look at another one. Thieves, stop stealing. This verse doesn't say anything about private property. If you're not a thief, don't think, well, thank goodness, it's about time somebody said something to those thieves. Once again, we have to read the entire verse. It barely implies that the criminal activity was the problem. Many of the earliest followers of Christ were very poor. And since early Christians shared all things in common, they still often had enough to eat. This became a problem because people who knew they were poor and saw them eating had to make the logical assumption they must be thieves. The prohibition against stealing includes honest work so that the former thieves can share with the needy. It's not just about stealing, it's about honest work to be able to participate in what the church was already doing, which was sharing everything in common. This rule takes a person from thief to benefactor, from greed to generosity, and it allows us, if we weren't stealing before, to take it and apply it to our lives. There's more to it than just stop stealing. It's do good, work honestly, so that we can participate in the life of the church. The early church didn't simply want its members to follow the rules. They wanted each one to find new life in Christ. They wanted people to see the world in a fresh way. They wanted the kind of people who could be freezing in mud up to their necks and start singing. When one starts, others join in and more join. And the transformed church can change the world. And that's what the power of Christ is. It's the power of hope and change. One person, whether it's Washington, Lincoln, King, Mandela, Malala, or you, can change the world. And this is where our reading from Ephesians gets personal. Because we have to put ourselves in the story. We picture the situation in our lives where we're up to our necks in mud and just trying not to quit, just trying to hang on, to keep going. This new life in Christ means that we lift our voices, and no matter how out of tune or horrible it sounds, we start singing. Or if we hear that someone else has already started, we join the song so that we can be a part of the chorus that is more powerful when we're singing together. There are people who need you to help them see that these rules are just an invitation to a deeper and more profound life. So I want to invite you to take this passage this week. Pick one verse and imagine how you could go beyond simply following the letter of the law. For example, if you focused on that verse 29, it's not enough just not to say bad stuff. We then would concentrate on speech that builds up and extends God's grace. That's just one example, but if you listen to the Spirit, lean into the silence that Welford invited us to embrace, we're going to hear God showing us our path, the place where we can learn how we can better embody Christ in our lives. Each one of us has a change we can make today to more fully let the light of Christ shine in our lives. Follow God and make the world a better place. Amen.